guys, how's it going? So I wanted to make a YouTube video right now to talk a little bit more about altered chords and improvising and playing cool sounds over jazz, because I feel like a lot of the lessons that I teach and the workshops that I teach, I end up focusing on those things because first of all, it's my favorite stuff to play on mandolin, but also there's really no one out there, a handful of guys out there teaching about this stuff. So when I say altered chords or altered sounds, I'll just tell you some of my favorite things that I do over jazz chords, and I'll play some examples, and I know you are going to start recognizing those sounds when you hear jazz music or you hear your favorite players, right? So a lot of times when the types of jazz music that I am playing, swing music that's rooted in these diatonic chord changes, 1, 6, 2, 5. 1 is your tonic, it's your root, right? And then let's say we're in the key of C, and you've got 6, 2, 5, 1, 6, 2, 5. The 6 is going to be A minor 7, and the 2 is D minor 7, and the 5 is G7. Those are the diatonic chord changes, right? Because all of those chords are made from notes of the very same C scale. But the really cool sounds that happen in jazz are not just the C scale notes. If you're playing a swing tune in the key of C that does 1, 6, 2, 5, there's still so many things you can play. You can play practically any note over these different situations, right? So I want to give you some insight into what I'm thinking about when I'm playing some of these different sounds, right? And the first thing to keep in mind is that a lot of these altered sounds are happening over a dominant chord. If you started on the 5 of a scale and played that same major scale, if you're in C and you're playing a C major scale, but you're starting on G, that makes a dominant chord. So it makes a G7. Now on these dominant chords, so if you're in the key of C and you go to the G7, there's so many different sounds you could do to really spice things up, right? So one really great sound is doing the flat 9. So that means that if you're thinking about now a G scale, starting on G, and you count all the way from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 octave. 9, if you kept going with the scale, you'd get to 9, and that's the same as a 2. You can play a G9. That just means the 9 means it's happening on top of the chord. We already are taking into account the first octave, and it's happening after that. But a really cool sound, you can play flat 9. So instead of an A natural, you can play. So beautiful, like one of my favorite sounds. Flat 9, we have the regular 9. You can also play sharp 9. Such a great chord as well. And a lot of times what you'll hear is the sharp 9 and the flat 9 in sequence. So like in one after the other, you'll hear. So that sound right there, if you have your G7 scale, see how I'm adding in those, I'm altering those notes. So I started out doing like a regular old 9. So another sound, it's a very common sound in Western music and in jazz, would be the augmented sound. So if you're in the key of C and you go to that G7, let's play the G7 here. So this is very standard G7 shape. The frets are 4, 3, 5. Now that 5th fret on the D note, if you raise that 1, that's the G7 with augmented. So augmented means that the 5th is being raised a half step. So when you see it written, it'll say like maybe G7 with a plus sign, or it'll just say G with a plus sign. And that plus sign means augmented. So if I play something in C, then I throw in that augmented arpeggio. And what is an augmented arpeggio? It's the same if you're starting with a G7 arpeggio or just a G arpeggio. And that arpeggio is a repeating pattern because it is a major third, but there's a major third interval between every note. So you can move that same pattern anywhere on the neck. The first example that I mentioned was having a flat 9 chord. Another way to think about having a flat 9 would be to incorporate the diminished sound. If you're not familiar with diminished, I will say it's very similar to the augmented, not because of the sound, it's a different sound, but because of the concept. The diminished is a pattern, it's a repeating pattern. So you have a diminished scale, but you also have like a diminished arpeggio. So a diminished arpeggio, for the purposes of what we're looking at, would be a minor third between each of the notes. So if you played this G7 again, and then this flat 9, I said, it contains the diminished sound. So right there, if I take that note and I do my diminished arpeggio, so minor thirds, what I was doing is strictly playing the diminished arpeggio. But if you see that it's on the G7 chord, you can throw that in, and it sounds like you're doing the flat 9 idea, because it's just a different way to represent or to interpret that group of notes, right? But that one, the truth is, the diminished sound, if you just play a diminished arpeggio, then it really just sounds like you're playing a diminished thing. It's a cool sound, but there's different ways to go about it. If you want to play that G7 with the flat 9 sound, I still have a G in there. See how I'm doing that? And I'm actually using a technique called enclosure because I want to play the G, but I play the notes around it. You could also play a flat 5 sound. So if you have this G shape, you could have that, and that's called the tritone substitution, because the flat 5 it's that perfect interval in between. Those two notes are the same distance apart, right? That G to D flat or C sharp. And a really easy hack for thinking about that is, let's say when you're in the key of C, we've been talking about the key of C, but you're on the C chord. So I'm playing something riffing over C. And then when it goes to the G7, think about, instead of playing the C notes, think about going up a half step. And of course, there's the altered scale, which can give you the flat 9, the sharp 9, and the augmented, and the flat 5, really all in the same thing. So if you want to play that altered sound, so you can think about going from the chord you're trying to play on, G7, go up a half step and play melodic minor. So in this case, A flat melodic minor. If you guys remember, what is the melodic minor? That's like a minor scale that's got a normal, natural 6 and 7, or I would say like a major 6 and a major 7 sound.